Richard, are you meaning to tell me that inflation is the saviour of every landlord? QVT! This can't be right, surely, that inflation's the saviour of every landlord. But then when we talked about this, when you come down to the effect on a mortgage and how it's a deficit debt reduction on your mortgage, that makes absolute sense. I mean, some of you, watching this, will be old enough to remember the 1970s and the bellroom trousers and huge collars, Saturday Night Fever.
Before my time.
Disco glitter balls, maxi dresses. No, me actually. So forget that. Midi skirts, still not me, but above everything else, we'll always remember hyperinflation in the mid 1970s. That was huge. I mean, inflation at that time stands right now at 11.1%, and many of us envy the last few years when we've been lucky to experience sub 2% inflation. But the 1970s in the UK had proper and persistent double-digit inflation of 7 or 10 years of that decade. The average annual inflation in the 1970s was 12.3% per year, with prices rising by 25% in 1975 alone.
So what was it that caused inflation to be like that?
Well, you tell me. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, the inflation back then probably caused by, and probably something that's familiar to now, obviously, oil prices quadrupling, I think around about 1973. There was an oil crisis, which sounds very familiar to what obviously we've just recently experienced. Powerful unions, a high level of growth and investment in the 50s and the 60s. So then obviously that had a knock-on effect into the 70s, meaning it was easier for the British economy to experience inflation pressures throughout the 70s. And the property market was, of course, not immune to these inflationary pressures.
That's quite interesting, actually. I mean, the average house price actually rose £3,127 to £16,196 for the average house price between the start of 1970 and 1979. Look at that when you think about it, right? If you look at that, right, and take that figure, that's we'll just do a wee calculation. I've got my calculator right here. Just jump into that. I want to see what percentage increase that was over that period of time. 3127 divided by minus, because it's 16196. I'm catching myself out here. Minus 3127 equals 13069. So 3127 divided by 13069 is a 24% increase in the whole of the 1970s in property prices. And we've had that in the last 2 years in Fife. That's mental.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So, and when you think about it, that would be the equivalent to the average Fife house price going from today's value of £195,070 to, oh wow, no way, that can't be right.
I know, I looked at these figures and thought...
Listen, it's true. That would be the equivalent of today's value of the average house price of £195,000 going to almost over £1 million in the next 10 years. Yeah. That's the equivalent of way of doing it in terms of what it was in the 1970 to 1979. That's mental.
I
said that already.
Astronomical jump in value.
I think when people hear the word inflation as well, everybody kind of has that bit of a panic. Like, to me, anyway, it's never been associated as like a good thing. So I think it's a really good topic to obviously be discussing today, because there's a lot more to it than I think that scary word that we first hear.
It's interesting to look at Cooper. I'm actually looking at some numbers because
just going to say, Jim,
There's
And I
great
tell you
gems in the
what,
area.
Cooper, and today's prices, from the increase in 1970 to 1979, the average Cooper house is 205,000. And in the next 10 years, if it would actually grow that fast as well, it would be £1.06 million.
Yeah.
So that's Cooper.
Even areas like Leven, obviously, going by today's price of 163,327 to be precise, that would jump up to £845,895. So, I mean, that in itself. Obviously, if you break it down by area, it's quite a big jump.
203,000 to 1.052 million in the next 10 years, an equivalent real terms increase. When you look at, where else have we got? We've got Glenrothes. Glenrothes would be 150,000 to 773,000. And then you've got as well, you've got Leedmouth, as you said, you've got that figure, but then you've got St Andrews. This will be interesting. St Andrews will. Jesus, really? No way! St Andrews, an equivalent of the rise of house prices in the 1970s, in the next 10 years would go for the average price of 425,000 to 2.2 million.
Yeah, just shy 2.2. That's crazy.
What does this tell us then? I mean, you know, this is great and it all sounds fantastic, but what does this actually tell us? You know, well, what does it tell us, Ern? You know, Ern. Put my teeth back in.
So the existing climate of rising prices, inflation, is affecting everybody. So from filling up cars with petrol to doing a weekly big shop. So everybody's feeling the effect of this. So looking specifically at the buy-to-let market, Fife landlords are suffering from rising costs and prices like everybody else. So including substantial increases in labour price, inflation as skill shortages have pushed up the cost of using all trades.
Yeah,
definitely.
This is what we talked about, Richard, as well during the week, about the fact that, you know, there's a lot of landlords out there actually using letting agents, and they don't realise, because rents aren't allowed to increase, that letting agents have still got the increase in their costs, but they aren't able to pass that on because the rents don't increase, therefore their percentage stays the same. And that's why we were talking about possibly introducing minimum pricing. And the fact that, you know, there's a certain amount that we're going to have to cover for every single rental property at a minimum level, because we just can't afford to sustain that with the rent freeze itself and having to absorb the increase in labour costs and material costs and everything else that comes with it. Yeah,
because the outgoings are steadily increasing, yet the income is staying the same. So it's like it's making it difficult.
You can't sustain a business like that at its core. I was actually talking about that some of the other day. That's actually one, you know, well, I've just sent you that email, Richard, about Willie Rennie wanting to have a wee chat with about the Fife property market. And I think it's important to actually point that one out as well at the same time when we do that. Other worries include whether tenants can pay their rent with the cost of living crisis. Also, there's a rise in the interest rates, in which increases landlords' mortgage payments. I've just managed to fix 3 of them, which were on variable rates of 7.5% down to 4.91% for 5 years.
That you didn't even realise you could do.
I'm sickened. I am sickened, because that letter has been coming through my door for the last 3 or 4 years with that exact phrase on it. Just go and visit here. And when they said to me, this is a tip for landlords, oh, we're not actually asking you to get a new valuation on the property, because mine are really 90% loan to value still. We're not asking for a new valuation on the property, so, you know, that's fine. I went, oh, really? It's like happy days. It's like I got in there straight away, and they've been just agreed today, the 2 of them, and then there's another one going through right now.
Yeah.
And so for any landlords out there that actually think they've got a high loan to value and they won't be able to actually remortgage it or get a new deal because they're on a variable rate, go and visit online your provider, because they'll have sent something through on your letter to say that, you know, if you've got any new deals that you want to consider, just go onto here, and it'll probably say we don't require a new valuation on it because you've had it that long. I mean, I've had these properties for 15, 20 years.
Yeah, it will be,
And I'm saying that I've been paying variable rate all that time, and I could have had it fixed. It's going to save me £4,000 in interest payments a year.
The good
Just
thing
because
is, though, you've eventually obviously become wise to it. But it would have been, in hindsight, it'd be good if you'd picked it up sooner.
I find it extremely difficult, though, in the fact that I've actually been preaching this to every other person to get themselves off of variable rates and get themselves into fixed rate mortgages to secure their payments.
Yeah.
And I've no done it myself, and I actually missed the boat on that one. And I could have probably had a lower rate, but at least it's that before what they are predicting, which is what I heard this morning on the news, and I'm getting emails through as well, saying that everybody's saying now the Bank of England on the 15th of December is going to increase base rates by at least 0.5%. I can't see that happening, because I don't think they've realised the full implications about what's happening and what the cost of living crisis is to anybody. But you know, the Bank of England, you know, once they've set their policy, they've set their policy, and hopefully we might be shocked. If anything, if it does go up, it'll strengthen the pound against the dollar and against the euro, because there's more investment coming into this country because base rates are higher. Therefore, returns could be higher as well for you know, bonds and stuff like that. So there's a every cloud has a silver lining thing. So, but when you look at this about whether tenants can actually pay their rent because of this crisis, and also I hate calling it a crisis. Also, there's a rise in it's like, you know what it is? You'll never remember this, but there was a commercial union advert I used to run years ago, and used to say, "We won't make a drama out of a crisis," at the end of it, and that was their tagline. In other words, you know, they won't exacerbate it even more. But it's almost like the media has just made the crisis the huge pantomime as it is, and the circus that's going on to keep everything going. So that's why I'm loath to use that phrase. The interest rate rises in landlords' mortgages, professional fees, accountants, landlords' insurance, and they all continue to climb.
I think what we're seeing because of this, though, is landlords getting into a bit of a panic because they know, especially with this moratorium that we've got, we can't increase the rents. So they're seem to be just, well, we'll put the rent on at that highest point that they can get for it, which effectively is just tenants are still having to pay high rents. It's not leveled things out particularly because landlords are aware they can't increase. So they're putting that property on at the highest end that they're going to get it for, to make sure that they're getting the income to cover the increase in interest rates, cover everything that has been increasing for them. So it's not necessarily benefiting tenants just now.
No.
So then the question is, Richard, is inflation all bad for Fife landlords or for landlords in general, right across
that
the
is
whole
the question. And I mean, most economists say that inflation is bad for the economy. The absence of steady and stable prices make consumers and businesses hold off making decisions to maybe buy things. And when that happens, the economy then stalls. Look at what happened to Germany in 1923, where you needed a carrier bag of cash to purchase a loaf of bread.
I was getting told about that yesterday in Poland, where one of my friends, Bob, actually went to Poland, and he says it was years and years ago. We're in Poland, and we paid them with one bill or something like that, and it was like 1 million zlotys.
Yeah.
And he says his change was just like this pile of notes to give him his change back, and it was equivalent to like 10 pence. But inflation had eroded everything so much that their currency was really worth nothing, and this is exactly what happened in Germany in 1923.
Yeah.
They basically needed a carrier bag of cash to buy a loaf of bread.
I mean, today, like in Zimbabwe, they have an annual inflation of 269% a year. And in Venezuela, it's 156% annual inflation, meaning their economies are on their uppers.
But the thing for me then is, if that's the case, then why are we so upset about 11.1% inflation?
When you look at that, I know, in comparison. And thankfully, obviously,
nobody's here. But they're still here, Richard. That's my point. You know, Zimbabwe's still here. It's no disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
You know, Venezuela's still here. And there's talk of Venezuela and nobody able to pay their debts and stuff like that. But they're still here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you know, I don't get it sometimes why we are so fixated on inflation.
Yeah. I mean, I think, thankfully, obviously, there's no prediction for the British inflation to go that way. But like you say, Jim, we're panicking at this level. And you look at countries like that, obviously, like they've got debts and things. But at that kind of level, I mean, 269% a year, that's just in comparison, just null and void in comparison, really. If we're around about obviously 12%. But I think it would surprise you that inflation can be good news for landlords. And I think that's, yeah, well, well, I think that's the point, obviously, to cover today. And I think the reason that as property has grown.
Can I just reaffirm what you've just said there? Yeah, it would surprise you that inflation can actually be good news for landlords. Is that what you just said to me?
That's exactly what I just said.
Tell me more. How is this?
Property has grown above the rate of inflation over the last 50 years, as we know. And we've discussed that previously. It means that your hard-earned savings invested in property will increase in value over and above the inflation rate, which will safeguard your wealth during these periods of high inflation.
Okay, I can go for that, because when you look at the average property price in the last 20 years over Britain, it's 170%. Inflation was running at an average of 70%. So overall, there's a 100% increase in property values. Therefore, everybody that's had their wealth in property or their money in property has actually benefited as a result of it. I could go for that. Tell me more.
Yeah, I think, and it's important though to be obviously to have the knowledge or have somebody around you or learning from someone. Because knowing where you are in the economic cycle makes it easier to spot when maybe house prices are lower in the short term or in real terms, thus buying yourself long-term extra profit. So you need to obviously be aware of the economic situation and where you fit in that cycle.
So the average Fife property today was £195,070. Roll back the clock to autumn 2007, where the credit crunch was, and it was actually £131,504. So quite a gain.
Yeah.
And well, not a profit. Just remember, it's a gain until you look at inflation. So, Karen, when we look at inflation, what does it appear?
So it appears people that bought in 2007 have made money when they have lost it in real terms.
All right, okay. Tell me more.
So what do we mean by real terms? This is one that I had to look at. So everyone knows that £100 today will not buy you even close to what £100 would have bought you 10 years ago, and much less than that 20 years ago. So that is the effect of inflation. Real terms means that the price value after adjusting for inflation and expensed income constant, was my words today, pound sterling, reflects buying powers relative to another year. So for example, the actual price of a Mars bar in 2000 was 26p. I think we probably all miss those days.
I can remember that.
And yet the real price expressed in today's prices is 74p. So why? Because that is what a Mars bar costs today.
Okay.
I would argue that it's more than that, but anyway.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that. I was
Depends
like,
what shop you walk into.
Yeah, I know.
Depends what shop you walked into, and I tell you what as well, is you actually get a smaller Mars bar than you probably got in the year 2000.
I mean,
So
I think Fredo is the classic
benefited in a number of ways. They've actually maximised the profit by making the bar smaller. You're almost like, when you look at it, in today's real terms, if you look back to 2000 and you look at the mini-sized Mars bars, that's probably the same as the normal Mars bar today.
Well, I think the British like to look at Freddos as their price of inflation, because you can see from what a Freddo used to cost you to what it is now.
I mean, it's 10 pence.
Exactly. So what price in the past has the same spending power today? So looking at the 1,300 and 1,000.
131,000.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's 131,500 for average price for the Fife house price in autumn 2007, as we just mentioned before.
Yeah, that's what we spoke about.
One would actually, somebody would actually need 219,000 today to buy the same amount of retail goods and services, cars, food, Mars bars, all the rest of it, in real terms. So that's what it actually means. So that actually means then, without any house price falls, which many are actually predicting, the average house price in Fife, when you think about it, that means the average house prices in Fife now are about £24,000 cheaper in real terms than they are in 2007. I've argued that all along. And now we've got conclusive proof when we look at these numbers that is the case.
Yeah, and if we break that down, you can break that down by area as well. So obviously that is
Got to be graph.
All right, go on then, Jim.
Got to be graph for that. I better show my graph. And you could talk about this, Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that? That doesn't look like it, but we'll try. It's no, that's us.
Oh, that'll be us.
I'm trying to get that graph again because it's actually quite important that people see this in a pictorial fashion. It's
Well,
probably
when you pull that up, Jim, I'll talk about different areas within Fife. So as you're saying, in Fife, obviously just shy 24,000 increase in the actual house price. So average house prices in the leaving area are just over 20,000 cheaper in real terms than 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Popular areas like East Neuk, the average house price at East Neuk is just shy 25,000. In real terms, it's cheaper than the 2007 prices. So there, you can see on the chart there. So you've got prices back in 2007 there, just where it peaks.
Mm-hmm.
So real house prices 219,059, and then obviously the current house price is 195,070. So that's where you've got your difference there. Do you see that?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking through it, and I'm looking at actual house price based on land registry. Real house price is based on actual house.
The blue line's real house price.
Today's retail prices. So real house price is the one at the blue. So that's what it would have to be. There you go.
So 219,059 in 2007, and in today's is 195,070. So that's your difference. Man. That's your difference there, 23,989, just shy 24,000 below.
Yeah, I could see that then how that would pan out. It is a lot cheaper today to buy in real terms compared to what it was before. There's a huge benefit to it. Which is what we've always argued that anyway. I mean, the significant advantage of inflation for landlords is buy-to-let mortgages, isn't it?
Yeah.
Most landlords use the buy-to-let mortgage to buy their property investment. So, give us some scenarios, Richard.
Well, let's assume that there was no inflation, like Japan in the last couple of decades. If you were a landlord and took out an interest-only buy-to-let loan for, say, 200,000 10 years ago, then in 10 years, that buy-to-let mortgage, which would need to be obviously paid off, would still have a real value of 200,000. That's in a scenario where there's no inflation.
Yeah.
So, and then secondly, let's assume that the same landlord took out an interest-only buy-to-let loan of 200,000 over the 10 years. 10 years ago, in the last decade, and then there has been a 31.4% inflation. So that buy-to-let mortgage would have a real value of only 137,200.
Yeah. This is my argument every single
time. See
the
difference
why you want to take out. There's a huge. This is the debt destruction. Inflationary pressure, and that's what it causes on buy-to-let mortgages or any mortgage in principle anyway, because it's the reality is the mortgage will technically get smaller in buying power than it was before. But the beauty of buy-to-let is you're earning money as well at the same time. So as you're benefiting from the mortgage actually getting reduced in terms of its real buying power, because it's the bank's money, no yours, and you are paying a percentage on it, but it's not as a bigger percentage as what you're making in rent as well. Therefore, you've got the upside of the rental and you've got the upside of the mortgage as well being in place. This is why I argue every single time, and this is not just this is not advice or anything like that. This is why I argue every single time, and this is just my opinion, that actually an interest-only buy-to-let mortgage is the best way forward for actually doing property investment. It alleviates your cash flow position because therefore you're not taking your cash flow and actually having to pay down debt every single time to reduce the mortgage. It keeps the mortgage actually reducing in value when the inflation's in place as well, when at high times of inflation like now.
Yeah.
So it gives you a better upside on that as well. And then therefore as well as your cash flow is maintained because you're not paying down the mortgage, therefore you've got the cash in your bank. And everybody goes, but then I'll be paying more money in interest overall on the mortgage. No, but there's a choice here. You'd be better to have it in your hand, the money, right, for the cash flow, than actually in the banks. Because what happened in the credit crunch is when property prices dropped like a stone, the people that had all done capital repayment mortgages had actually gone back to their bank and says, can I release some money again? Because I really need that money to actually go and spend on, upgrading my property. And they went, do one, pal. Yeah. It's like, and I went, all mine are interest only. Therefore, I've got all my money in the bank still.
Yeah, rather than tied up.
That's the huge benefit of having that for the cash flow, because it allows you to reinvest again. And you can simply take the cash again and recycle and recycle and recycle and put it in to the next investment, the next investment, the next investment, and it just keeps multiplying in income. Yeah. So you're actually compounding your wealth.
Yeah, it's like the multiplier effect, and the cash flow is such an important element of that. To be able to reinvest and build. If you're an investor in building a portfolio and things, cash flow is key. So in order to be able to do that to the best of your advantage, interest-only mortgages are the best way to do that.
So, Karen, what about inflation? What's your thoughts on this? Will they be in double digits?
So now inflation won't be in double digits. For the long term in the UK, higher interest rates and a recession will pay to that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cannot read, to be honest. Yet, let's say inflation rates for the next 10 years was 4% per annum.
Yep.
So, in this scenario, the real value of the 200,000 buy-to-let mortgage falls to less than half its original real value of 91,278.
Because they're doing the reverse effect of compounding inflation. I get that completely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people and it's quite hard, and people maybe don't. It's hard to kind of maybe grasp that and understand.
Hello, is that the bank manager?
But once you
get another mortgage, please?
Once you put it into kind of layman terms and break it down, it does make sense.
And can I get a further advance?
And that is how inflation works to a landlord's advantage.
Exactly. So if anyone thinks about it, inflation could be just the thing that Fife landlords need to shrink the real value of the buy-to-let mortgage. As the saying goes, every cloud has a silver lining.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. On the back of double-digit percentages, growth rises in rents, and then everything stated in this, what we're talking about now, inflation actually could be the silver lining overall.
Yeah.
For landlords in general, right across the UK.
Yeah, I think if you're in the know or got some, like I say, got the people around you that know what they're talking about and getting good advice, and maybe listening to things like what we're doing just now, you could really use inflation to your advantage as a buy-to-let.
Every single property guru I've been or guru, whoever that is, every single guru or furu that you've been listening to or I've been listening to has never once mentioned the power of inflation for property investment.
Yeah,
and what it does.
It's not something that's really commercially spoke about or promoted. Everybody's in a panic because they listen to the media and think, and like I say, we're just shy like 12% inflation. Look at other countries and their inflation rates. So, but as we've just demonstrated today, use it to your advantage, especially when it comes to your buy-to-let mortgage.
And that's I'd be interested to hear other people's opinions on this. So if you've got an opinion, please feel free to comment it in the comments later on. If you're watching this or listening to this on the podcast, then by all means, get in touch with us if you want more information on this. We do wealth creation workshops as well. All this information is free that we give away. The only upside or the only upsell that we're trying to do here is you come along, you buy a property in Fife to rent, and by any chance, we might get the opportunity to rent it for you and get the management in. That's it, really. There's no coasters we're selling or anything like that. Just all free information, free advice, and free support to get you to the level of wealth you actually want. You can reach any level of wealth you want. You've just got to believe it. That's what it comes down to. And that's it. Thanks very much for coming on the show, Richard and Karen. And until next week's midweek show, it's bye-bye from us. Richard, you've got a show a letting show possibly on Saturday, is that?
Letting show on Saturday morning.
What we're talking about, or I'll put you on the spot.
No, you have a wee bit, actually.
As he quickly looks up.
As I quickly look at the topic for Saturday morning, like Saturday morning is landlord legal errors, which is quite a good one. Karen and I will be doing that on Saturday, so please join us for that. Saturday morning 9:30. Jim and I will be doing the Wealth Creation Show Monday 12:30, and then join us midweek next week. I don't think we've picked a day yet, but we'll have a midweek show next week as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Wealth Creation Show Monday will be quite good actually as well, because I'm going to be talking about, obviously we're now out of college. I'm now into industry. I'm now going to be talking about my journey in terms of, this is when I first met my mentors for the very first time 30 years ago. Maybe a wee bit more than that actually, because it was a way before that actually, before I got into buy-to-let. I was involved in other business enterprises as well, but that was the result of the mentors that I actually was introduced to, and how they helped me accelerate, not only in buy-to-let, because buy-to-let wasn't their thing, they weren't involved in it at all themselves and never have been. What they helped me accelerate was in my career as well, by what they'd been teaching me at the time. So regardless if it's not just property investment we're going to be talking about in the Wealth Creation Show. It is a wealth creation show, and it's about how to increase your skill set in order to accelerate your career. If it's a career you want in industry, if you're wanting a bit more money, out of your employer, there's other ways to do this as well, and this is what we talk about on the show. All these different things will manifest themselves if you plug yourself into that type of system that we're talking about on Monday. And in 5 years' time, you could be anybody you want, to be honest.
I'm looking forward to Monday. I think we left off. You just think you were progressing from your kind of side hustle things, and how learning for others kind of, like you say, propelled you into obviously further than that. So that'll be quite interesting.
Yeah. And it is important. It is important. I talk about the system I was plugged into. And I literally mean plugged into, as in it's like a socket. If you're on things like books, tapes, uplines, mentors, and all the rest of it, and then you suddenly decide that you don't want to do that anymore, you're unplugging yourself from a system. Therefore, you're not learning anymore. Therefore, you're not improving anymore. And it's almost just like a university education. If you stop studying, you're not going to pass it.
Yeah.
But the great thing is, with these type of systems that I'm going to talk about, it doesn't break the bank to actually get involved in them. And I think that could be a blessing, or it could be a curse. And the reason it could be a curse is because sometimes it's so easy to do this and create wealth. People actually think it's
too easy.
Real. It's not real. It's too easy. It mustn't be true. It mustn't be true because it's too easy. Well, to be honest, it's not too easy, but it takes time, effort, and dedication, and consistency and discipline. And that's what we're going to talk about on Monday at the Wealth Creation Show at 12:30.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks for coming on the show. And until next week.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye-bye for now.